Let's be honest. There are moments in a man's life when something small shifts and he feels it in his chest before he can explain it in his head. A pause in her voice, a sentence she almost didn't say, a detail she didn't owe you, and suddenly you feel unsettled. Not because you're losing her, but because you might already have her in a way you've never experienced before. Most men miss this moment. They're trained to look for signs that scream desire, attraction, validation. But the real turning point is quieter. It doesn't flatter your ego, it challenges your awareness. When a woman shares something specific with you, not a fun story, not a surface level confession, not a complaint about her day, it means something far deeper than interest. It means safety. And safety in female psychology is the gateway to emotional attachment. Not comfort, not boredom, safety. The kind that allows her to lower the armor she didn't even know she was wearing. Women don't do this accidentally. Every layer they reveal has a cost. Every truth shared is measured against one silent question. Will this man handle me better after he knows this? Here's what most men don't understand. Attraction gets attention. Confidence gets respect. But trust changes behavior. When she shares something she rarely says out loud, something that shaped her, hurt her, or changed how she sees herself, she's no longer evaluating you as a possibility. She's testing you as a container. Can you hold this without fixing it, without using it later, without seeing her differently in a way that feels unsafe? At that moment, you are no longer competing with other men. You are being weighed against her past. This is where men either win quietly or lose without realizing it because the instinct is to react, to reassure too quickly, to joke it away, to problem solve. But what she's watching isn't your words. It's your nervous system, your stillness, your restraint, your ability to stay grounded when she hands you something fragile. Women are experts at reading microshifts, a tightening jaw, a rushed response, a subtle judgment masked as logic. She will feel it before she understands it. If she shares this with you, it means she believes you are different from the men who made her build walls in the first place. And that belief is rare. It's not given to the loudest man, the richest man, or the smoothest man. It's given to the man who feels emotionally predictable, calm, present, unthreatened by depth. This is why some men with average looks and quiet confidence create intense emotional bonds, while others with everything going for them are kept at a distance. Understand this clearly. When she opens this door, she is inviting you into her inner world, not to conquer it, not to control it, but to respect it. And if you do, you'll notice something subtle happen. She starts to check in with you emotionally. She values your reactions. She references past conversations. Her trust begins to shape her attraction. At that point, you're no longer chasing chemistry. You're becoming significant. And significance is where real power lives. When she shares this with you, it's rarely dramatic. It doesn't come with tears every time. Sometimes it sounds casual, almost throwaway. A sentence slipped between laughs, a memory mentioned without emphasis. But the emotional weight behind it is heavy, and she's watching closely to see if you feel it. This is where female psychology operates in silence. What she shares is important, but how you receive it determines everything that comes next. Most men think women bond through attraction first and trust later. In reality, for women, emotional safety often creates attraction. When she tells you about a fear she hasn't fully healed from, a past mistake she still judges herself for, or a pattern she's ashamed to repeat, she's doing something risky. She's exposing a version of herself that could lower her value in your eyes. At least that's what her subconscious fears. If you handle that moment with calm strength, her nervous system relaxes. And when a woman's nervous system relaxes around a man, attachment begins to form. This is why overreaction kills momentum. Excessive reassurance can feel patronizing. Overanalysis feels invasive. Silence without presence feels like withdrawal. The balance is subtle. You acknowledge without interrogating. You validate without dramatizing. You stay grounded without becoming cold. This tells her something powerful. You are not overwhelmed by depth. You are not threatened by complexity. You don't need her to be perfect to stay interested. That realization alone separates you from most men she's known. Here's the uncomfortable truth. When she shares this with you, she's also deciding how much influence you'll have over her emotions moving forward. Not in a manipulative way, but in a natural human way. We allow the people we trust to affect us more deeply. If she didn't care, she wouldn't risk letting you see behind the curtain. Indifference doesn't open doors. curiosity and safety do. You might notice subtle shifts after this moment. She becomes more honest, not just kinder. She may disagree with you more openly. She may show you moods she hides from others. That's not regression, that's progress. It means she no longer feels the need to perform. Performance is for approval. Authenticity is for connection. And connection is where loyalty begins to take root. Many men sabotage this stage by trying to lock it down. They rush labels. They push for certainty. They try to convert emotional closeness into control. But emotional closeness doesn't want to be contained. It wants to be respected. The more space you give her to be herself without consequence, the more she chooses you voluntarily. Choice is the foundation of desire. Obligation kills it. Understand this deeply. When she shares something personal, she's not asking you to fix her. She's asking if you can see her without turning away. That's it. And if you can, something shifts in her perception of you. You become the man she can exhale around, the man she doesn't have to armor up for, the man whose presence feels steady instead of stimulating chaos. At this stage, you've already won something most men never reach. Not exclusivity, not control, influence, emotional credibility. And once you have that, attraction stops being fragile, it becomes rooted. And rooted attraction doesn't disappear when the excitement fades, it deepens. This is the point where the dynamic quietly flips and most men don't even notice it happening. Up until now, you may have felt like you were the one proving yourself, showing value, staying sharp. But once she shares this with you and you handle it with emotional control, something changes beneath the surface. She begins to invest mentally before she ever does verbally. And mental investment is where attachment actually forms. Here's what female psychology doesn't announce out loud. When a woman feels emotionally understood, her mind starts looping you into her internal world. She replays conversations. She wonders how you'd react to things that haven't happened yet. She measures other men against the emotional baseline you've set. This isn't obsession, it's orientation. You become a reference point. And when you are her reference point, you are already ahead of every man trying to impress her. This is why chasing attention becomes irrelevant at this stage. Attention is loud. Connection is quiet. When she shares something personal and you don't exploit it, rush it, or retreat from it, she subconsciously categorizes you as stable. And stability is rare. Most men oscillate between intensity and absence, between charm and insecurity, between pursuit and resentment. A man who remains consistent after intimacy, emotional intimacy, is perceived as powerful. You'll notice she begins to test you differently now, not with games, but with truth. She may share a boundary. She may challenge an opinion. She may express disappointment without sugarcoating it. This is not rejection. This is trust evolving. She's no longer afraid that being real will push you away. And that's a dangerous place to occupy in the best possible way, because now losing you would cost her something emotionally. But here's the mistake that ends this advantage. Many men, once they sense this shift, lean in too hard. They become emotionally greedy. They start demanding access instead of appreciating it. They turn moments of vulnerability into leverage. And the moment a woman feels that her openness has created a loss of freedom, her nervous system tightens again. Walls don't come back loudly. They come back quietly. The strength here is restraint. You don't need to reference what she shared. You don't need to remind her of closeness. You don't need to secure reassurance. The bond is already forming in her mind. Your job is to remain the same grounded presence she trusted when she took that risk. Consistency after vulnerability is what turns connection into attachment. There's another layer most men never consider. When she shares this with you, she's also rewriting her own story. She's proving to herself that safe men exist. That depth doesn't always lead to abandonment or control. And because you're part of that new narrative, you become emotionally symbolic. You're no longer just a man. You're evidence. And people protect the evidence that reshapes their beliefs. This is why jealousy fades at this stage. Not because she doesn't care, but because her focus narrows. When emotional alignment happens, the noise of options quiets down. She doesn't need to announce loyalty to feel it. She feels it in her body first. Calm replaces chaos. Clarity replaces confusion. If you've reached this point, understand the weight of it. You didn't win her by strategy. You won her by emotional maturity, by not needing to dominate the moment she opened up, and that tells her more about your value than any display ever could. This is where things become fragile, not because you're losing ground, but because you're holding something valuable without a manual. When a woman has shared this part of herself with you, she is now emotionally exposed in a way she doesn't fully control. And paradoxically, that makes her more sensitive, not less. This is the phase where men who think they've already won often sabotage themselves. Female psychology doesn't respond to possession, it responds to permission. The moment she feels you believe access is guaranteed, her instincts shift, not out of cruelty, but self-protection. Emotional openness is not a contract. It's a living state that must feel safe to remain open. That safety comes from your behavior after the closeness, not during it. You may notice that she pulls back slightly. Messages slow, energy fluctuates. This is not disinterest, it's regulation. She's integrating what she shared and watching whether the dynamic changes. Does your tone become heavier? Do expectations creep in? Do you subtly demand the same depth on command? This is where your emotional discipline matters most. You don't chase the pullback. You don't punish it with distance. You stay centered. A grounded man doesn't panic. When a woman recalibrates, he understands that intimacy breathes. Expansion and contraction are natural. When you remain steady, you communicate something powerful without words. You're not dependent on her emotional availability to remain yourself. That independence is deeply attractive because it removes pressure, and pressure is the fastest way to shut a woman down. There's a quiet test happening here. Can you allow her autonomy without withdrawing affection? Can you remain warm without becoming needy? Can you continue your life with purpose instead of orbiting her emotional state? When the answer is yes, her trust deepens because now she sees that opening up to you didn't create obligation, it created freedom. This is also where respect solidifies, not the loud performative kind, but the internal kind. She begins to speak about you differently to herself. She notices how calm you remain, how you don't weaponize silence, how you don't over-explain. Those traits signal leadership at an emotional level. And emotional leadership is what many women crave but rarely find. If she shared this with you, she is watching for one thing above all else: consistency, not constant attention, not endless affirmation. Consistency of character. Are you the same man when she's open as when she's quiet? When she's expressive as when she's reserved? Predictability and character creates safety and attachment. Most men think attraction is about escalation. In reality, this stage is about containment, holding space without squeezing it, allowing closeness without consuming it. When you master this, you become the man she doesn't feel the need to guard herself against. And here's the quiet truth. If you can navigate this phase without anxiety, without control, without ego, you don't just maintain the connection, you deepen it. She relaxes further. She leans back in on her own because nothing is more magnetic than a man who doesn't collapse under intimacy. By now, if she has shared this with you and you've handled everything without changing who you are, you're no longer being evaluated the way most men are. You're being felt, and there's a difference. Evaluation is logical. Feeling is emotional. Once a woman moves from assessing you to experiencing you, the connection stops being fragile and starts becoming personal. This is where her attachment becomes embodied. She doesn't just think about you, her body recognizes you. Your presence calms her. Your absence is noticed, not in panic, but in awareness. You occupy space in her emotional rhythm. That doesn't happen because you demanded it. It happens because you allowed it. At this stage, she may begin to share patterns she's never admitted before. How she self-sabotages, why she pulls away when things feel good, what scares her about commitment or loss. This isn't her asking you to reassure her endlessly. This is her inviting you into her internal logic. And being invited into someone's inner logic is intimacy at its highest level. What matters now is integrity, emotional integrity. Do your actions align with the calm, grounded energy you've shown so far? Or do you start to take shortcuts because you feel secure? Women are incredibly sensitive to shifts in effort. Not effort in quantity, but in intention. Are you still present, still listening, still respectful of her boundaries? Or are you coasting? Coasting is subtle. It sounds like assumptions. It feels like complacency. and it's often invisible to the man doing it. But to a woman who risked emotional exposure, it feels like being taken for granted. The remedy isn't overcompensation. It's attention with intention, staying curious, staying emotionally available without being emotionally dependent. You may also notice that she begins to mirror you. Your emotional regulation becomes hers. Your pace becomes the pace of the connection. This is not manipulation, it's attunement. Humans synchronize with what feels safe, and right now, you feel safe. Here's the deeper layer. When she shares something this personal and you remain consistent, you give her something most relationships never provide: a corrective emotional experience. You show her that closeness doesn't have to cost her herself, that being seen doesn't lead to control, that vulnerability doesn't always lead to pain. And because of that, her attachment to you isn't just romantic, it's reparative. This is why walking away from a man like this feels difficult. Not because of fear, but because of meaning. You've become part of her healing narrative, and that carries weight. But remember this: power at this stage is quiet. You don't need to define it. You don't need to label it. You don't need to rush it. The more you let it unfold naturally, the deeper it roots. Emotional bonds grow strongest when they are not forced to perform. If you've reached this point, understand what you've done. You didn't conquer her heart. You earned her trust, and trust once earned reshapes attraction in ways that time alone never could. If she has shared this with you, and you've walked every step with calm strength, you didn't just win her attention. You changed how she experiences connection, and that's rare. By now, her feelings aren't driven by excitement alone. They're anchored in emotional safety, respect, and meaning. When attraction becomes conscious, effort becomes consistent. She shows up without excuses, the kind of bond that doesn't need constant validation to survive. This is where most men finally relax, but the strongest men stay aware. Not anxious aware, because what you've built isn't maintained through effort, but through alignment. You don't need to act different to keep her. You need to stay the same man she trusted when she opened up. At this point, her loyalty isn't something she announces. It shows up in small decisions: who she prioritizes, who she thinks about when something important happens, who she wants to share silence with, not just excitement. Emotional attachment reveals itself in those quiet preferences, and you're already there. Now, here's the truth that completes the picture. When a woman shares something deeply personal with you, she's not just revealing herself, she's asking a question without words. Is this safe here? Can I stay me and still be chosen? Your consistency answered that question, and once answered, she stops bracing for loss. She settles. That settling is powerful. It doesn't kill desire, it focuses it. The chaos of uncertainty fades, replaced by depth. And depth is what sustains attraction over time. This is why relationships built on emotional safety outlast those built on intensity. Intensity burns fast. Safety burns steady. But remember this equation, because this is where everything comes together. Emotional safety plus consistency, control, lasting attraction. Ask yourself honestly, where do you stand in that equation right now? And where do you think she feels you stand? Drop your answer in the comments. I read them more than you think. If this resonated with you, like the video so it reaches the men who need to hear it. Subscribe for deeper insights into female psychology and real relationship dynamics. And share this with a friend who's still chasing signs instead of becoming the man she feels safe choosing.